It's a Tuesday morning in Laureless, about 6:15, and I'm standing in a kitchen that isn't mine making eggs for a 9-year-old I have no legal or biological relationship with. He's sitting at the counter in his school uniform with his hair still wet, and he asks me, in Spanish, because his English is worse than my Spanish and we both know it, whether I'm going to be there on Saturday, because there's a thing at his school, a presentation, and his mother has to work. And I said yes, because what else do you say to that? I left Colombia 11 days later. I had a flight to Sao Paulo I'd booked 3 months earlier, back when I thought I was just having a nice time with a woman I liked. I'm Luke. I've spent the last 7 years moving between cities in Latin America, and I've spent about 18 months of that in Medellín, across 3 separate stays. Now, this video has a title that sounds like a warning about women. It isn't. By the end of this, you're going to understand that the warning is aimed almost entirely at you, that the reason men get wrecked dating women in their late 30s and 40s in Medellín has very little to do with those women, and almost everything to do with what a foreign guy assumes he's walking into. And you're going to understand why the guys who get hurt worst are usually the ones who thought they were being smart. If you're considering doing something similar, or you just want to know what it's actually like, please subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Let me back up to why I was in that kitchen in the first place. This was my 3rd stay in Medellín. I'd done El Poblado at 33 and again at 35, and by the time I came back at 37 I was done with it. Not morally done with it. Just tired. There's a version of Medellín that runs on a loop, Provenza on a Thursday, the same 6 rooftop bars, the same conversations with the same guys from Phoenix and Toronto who've been there 4 months and speak 60 words of Spanish. I'd been one of those guys. I knew exactly how that story went, because I'd already lived it twice, and the second time was worse than the first. So, I made a decision that I thought was mature. I rented in Laureless instead of Poblado. 1 bedroom, 3rd floor, 6 blocks off the Segundo Parque. $1,100 a month furnished, which was maybe $200 over market, but I didn't want to negotiate in my second language for a week. Laureless is flatter, older, greener, and full of people who live actual lives. Families, students from the universities, professionals who've been in the same apartment for 20 years. The bars on La Saventi skew toward guys watching Nacional games and drinking aguardiente with their brothers-in-law. It is not a place designed to hand you anything. And along with the neighborhood, I made a second decision, which was the one that actually mattered. I decided I was going to date grown women, not 24-year-olds. Not the Instagram-adjacent economy that runs through Provenza, where half the interactions have a price attached somewhere in the second act. I was 37. I wanted to talk to someone about something. I had this theory, and I want you to hear how reasonable the theory sounds, because that's the whole trap, that women in their late 30s and 40s would be lower drama. More direct, less flaky, no games. They'd have their own money, their own apartment, their own life. It would be simpler. I was right about almost all of that, by the way. That's the part nobody warns you about. Every single thing I predicted came true. The women I met were direct. They were not flaky. They had their own money and their own apartments and their own lives. They did not play games with me even once. And it was the most consequential 4 months I've had in that country, and I handled it badly, and I'm still not entirely sure I've made it right. Here's who I was actually meeting, because the demographics matter more than anything else in this video. I wasn't meeting these women on apps, mostly. Tinder and Bumble in Medellín skew heavily toward the tourist-facing scene, which was the exact thing I was trying to get away from. I met people 3 ways. A Spanish-English conversation intercambio that met Wednesdays near the Estadio Metro, a gym in the same area where I went 5 days a week for 4 months, and eventually just new people, and, the most productive by a wide margin, friends of friends, somebody's cousin, somebody's coworker. The women I ended up spending time with were between 34 and 43, a dentist with a practice in Envigado, a woman who did logistics coordination for a flower exporter, a school teacher, a hairdresser who owned her own chair in a salon in Belén, and had built that up from nothing over 11 years. Some were divorced, some had never married. Most, and I mean most, this is not a small subset, this is the default, had at least 1 child. That last fact is the single most important piece of information in this entire video, and I'm going to come back to it hard. The central thing I got wrong was this. I thought I was selecting for lower stakes, What I was actually doing was selecting for higher stakes. I had it exactly, precisely inverted. Let me show you what I mean with 3 specific things that happened. The first was a woman named Marcella, 39, the dentist, 2 kids, 10 and 14, ex-husband still in the picture in a functional way. We went out 4 times over about 2.5 weeks. Good conversation, real chemistry. The whole thing was going well by any measure I understood. On the 4th night, we were at a place near the Ciclovia end of Laureles, and she put her glass down and asked me, completely calmly, no edge to it at all, how long I was planning to be in Colombia and what I was looking for. And I gave the answer. You know the answer. Every guy watching this knows the answer, because we've all given it. I said something like, I'm here for a few more months. I'm pretty flexible. I like to see how things develop. I'm not in a rush. That is a fine answer in Denver. That is a completely normal, socially acceptable, borderline attractive answer in the United States, where ambiguity reads as being relaxed and low pressure. She smiled. We finished the night pleasantly, and she never responded to me again. Not rudely, she just stopped. I texted twice, got a friendly non-answer, and that was the end of it. It took me about a month to understand what had happened. She wasn't offended. She wasn't playing hard to get. She had asked me a screening question and I had failed it, and she had a job and 2 children and a limited number of free evenings, and she was not going to spend any more of them on a man who wouldn't answer a direct question directly. That's not a Colombian thing or a woman thing. That is a 39-year-old with 2 kids thing. She had run the numbers on me in about 4 seconds, and the numbers said no. Lesson 1. With a woman in that bracket in Medellín, vagueness is not neutral. It's a disqualifying answer. She's not asking because she wants a commitment on date 4. She's asking because she needs to know which category to file you in so she can allocate her time. Give her a real answer, even a real answer she doesn't like, and you stay in the game. Give her fog and you're gone. The second thing was a woman named Diana, 42, never married, worked in textiles, sharp as hell, funny in a dry way that took me 2 weeks to even catch. We were maybe 5 weeks in, seeing each other twice a week, nothing declared. She invited me to her mother's house in Belén for Sunday lunch. I said yes, the way an American says yes to lunch. Sure, sounds nice. What should I bring? I brought a bottle of wine, which was wrong, but that's a different video. There were 11 people in that house. Her mother, 2 sisters, a brother-in-law, an aunt, 4 kids, and a neighbor, who I think just lived there functionally. I was seated in a specific chair. I was asked specific questions by specific people in a specific order. Her mother asked me what my parents did. Her brother-in-law asked me, twice, in 2 different ways, how long I'd been in Colombia and whether I was thinking of staying. I left that house 3 hours later feeling great about it, and it took me until the following week to understand that I had been presented, not tested, presented. In the US, meeting the family is a milestone that comes after the relationship has been defined. In Medellín, in that milieu, with a woman that age, it is the definition. It is the announcement. She had not asked me to be her boyfriend because in her frame, bringing me to that table and having me sit in that chair was the asking, and I had said yes with my whole body for 3 hours. I didn't handle that one gracefully either. I had a conversation with her about 10 days later that was overdue and clumsy, and it ended things, and she was more decent to me in that conversation than I deserved. Lesson 2. The milestones are in different places than you think they are. You are operating from a script where the sequence is date, exclusivity, family. Her sequence is interest, family, everything else. You can be 6 moves into a game you don't know you're playing, and nobody is deceiving you. You're just illiterate. The third one is the one from the kitchen. Her name was Paula, 37, hairdresser, owned her chair, worked 6 days a week, had a 9-year-old son named Samuel, and no father in the picture beyond an occasional deposit. We met through a friend from the gym. 4 months, which by the standards of my life is a long time. And it was good. I'm not going to do the thing where I tell you it was secretly bad. It was good. She was the most competent person I have ever dated. She ran a household, a business, a kid, and her mother's medical appointments on about 5 hours of sleep, and she still had the energy to laugh at me trying to conjugate the subjunctive. I liked her enormously. Samuel and I got along. That happened gradually, and then all at once. Month 1, I was a guy who came over sometimes. Month 2, I was helping with English homework. Month 3, I was picking him up from school on Fridays because it was genuinely easier for everybody. Month 4, I was making him eggs on a Tuesday and saying yes to a school presentation on Saturday. And then I got on a plane to São Paulo because I'd booked it in month 1, before any of this was true. I want to be careful here because I'm not telling you this story so you'll feel bad for me. I'm telling you this story because of what it revealed about the actual structure of the thing. When you end a relationship with a 25-year-old in Provenza, you have wasted her time. That's real. And it's not nothing, but it's recoverable. When you end a relationship with a 37-year-old who has integrated you into a household, you have removed a load-bearing element from a structure that was already carrying weight. She reorganized her Fridays around me. Her son reorganized something considerably more important than his Fridays. That's the phenomenon, that's the whole video in one sentence, and I'll say it plainly. Women in this bracket in Medellín are load-bearing. They hold up households, kids, aging parents, siblings, a business, sometimes all four. And you do not casually lean on a load-bearing wall and then walk out of the building. There's a second half to this that men find harder to hear, the asymmetry of experience. A 40-year-old Paisa woman has been watching foreign men cycle through her city since she was in her 20s. She's watched the neighborhood change. She's watched Poblado turn into what it is. She has friends who married Americans and friends who got wrecked by Americans, and she has heard every single line you're planning to use, in worse Spanish than yours, from a guy who was more charming than you. She is not naive. She can read you in about 10 minutes. Which means if she chooses you, she has chosen deliberately, with information, after screening. And that feels fantastic. That feels like being seen. Right up until the moment you realize that she selected you with enormous care, and you selected her because she was interesting and available, and you were lonely and 37. That's the imbalance. Not money, not power, not language. Care. She's playing for real, and you're playing for now. And the reason it goes badly is not that anybody lied. I want to know, how many of you watching this are seriously thinking about doing something similar? Drop the city you're thinking about in the comments. I read all of them. Okay, let me get into what men get wrong, because I've now watched a lot of guys do this, and there's a pattern. The biggest one I call the skip the party girls fallacy, and I fell for it completely. It goes like this. A guy comes to Medellín, spends 2 months in Poblado, gets burned, flaked on, drained financially, or just exhausted by the churn, and concludes that the problem was the demographic, so he swings hard the other way. He tells himself he's going to date real women. Grown women, women with careers. He congratulates himself for it. He thinks he's graduated. What he's actually done is move from a low-consequence environment to a high-consequence one while keeping all the same habits. He's still vague about his timeline. He's still generous without being clear. He's still treating a relationship as something you're in until you're not. And those habits cost you a few $100s, and some wasted evenings in Provenza. In Laureles, dating a woman with a kid and a mortgage, those exact same habits cost somebody their year. The failure mode doesn't get milder, it gets heavier. You just stop being the one who eats it. Second thing men get wrong. They read warmth as signal. Paisa social warmth is a baseline register, not a message about you specifically. The affection in the language, the physical ease, the speed at which you go from stranger to being folded into somebody's Sunday, that's the ambient temperature. American men, coming from a culture where that level of warmth means something has been decided, consistently overread it. Then they get confused when a woman who was warm to them for 3 weeks is completely unbothered about disappearing. Both things were true. She was warm. She hadn't decided anything. Third, money. And I want to talk about this carefully because it's the part everybody wants to hear about, and most of what's out there is garbage. My expensive lesson in this city was Catalina, 7 months, several years before the stay I've been describing. She wasn't older. She was 29. But the mechanism of what happened is directly relevant, so bear with me. What went wrong there wasn't that she was a predator and I was a mark. What went wrong is that I was generous and unclear at the same time, for months. And I let money become the primary language of the relationship because it was the easiest thing for me to give and the hardest thing for her to refuse. By month 4, financial support was structural. By month 6, removing it would have been an act of aggression. I built that, she let me build it, and she benefited from it. And she wasn't honest with me at the end. But I poured the foundation. Now translate that to a woman who's 40 and running a household. Money enters that dynamic faster, and with far more legitimacy. She's not asking you to buy her a handbag. Her mother needs a procedure. The school wants an enrollment fee. Her business needs a deposit on a new chair. These are real. And helping is not being played. Helping is what a partner does. Which is exactly the problem. In the Poblado version, financial requests are a red flag. In this version, they're a normal feature of being close to somebody who carries weight. You cannot use the flag system. You need an actual policy. Fourth, estrato blindness. Medellín stratifies neighborhoods 1 through 6, and everybody local knows exactly what everything signals. Your $1,100 apartment communicates something specific that you did not intend to communicate. When you casually pick up a 200,000 peso dinner check, you're not being polite, you're making a statement about a gap. You don't have to fix that gap. You do have to know it's in the room, because she does, and her family definitely does. And if you're the only person at the table who hasn't noticed it, you're not being egalitarian, you're being oblivious. Fifth, and this is the one I'd tattoo on people, you cannot declare no expectations into existence. Guys say it constantly. I said it. You can say the words. It is not an available category there, not with a woman that age, not with a household behind her. Announcing that a thing has no consequences does not remove the consequences. It just means you'll be surprised by them. And sixth, the kids. Men say, I'm fine with kids, the way they'd say they're fine with dogs. What fine with kids means at month 4 is that a 9-year-old has started structuring his week around whether you're going to be there, and you are now an adult male presence in the life of a child who has had a shortage of those, and the exit you were casually reserving for yourself has become something with a real cost attached to a person who did not consent to any of this. So, what does it actually take to do this without leaving damage behind? First, state your timeline in numbers, out loud, within the first 2 or 3 meetings, not a few months. A date. I have a flight on March 14th, and right now, I intend to be on it. Then say it again around week 3, because people hear what they want the first time. This feels aggressive to Americans. It is not aggressive there. It's the normal thing. Marcella asked me directly and I flinched, and I've thought about that 100 times since. Second, decide your money policy before you're inside a situation where it matters, and make it a rule rather than a judgment call. Mine, after Catalina, is simple. I pay for things we do together. Dinners, trips, the stuff that exists because I'm there. I do not pay for anything structural. Not rent, not tuition, not phone bills, not the family emergency. Not because those requests are illegitimate. Because the moment I'm funding the structure, I'm not a boyfriend, I'm an institution, and institutions can't leave. If I ever decide I'm actually staying permanently, I can revisit the rule. Until then, it's not negotiable, and it's not personal. Third, and this is the hard one, do not meet the children. Not for the first several months. Not briefly. Not just to say hi. I know how that sounds. It sounds cold, and it sounds like I'm treating a woman's kid as a liability. It's the opposite. Meeting the child is not a step in your relationship, it's an intervention in a third party's life, and that third party gets no vote and takes all the risk. If you are not at the point where you would genuinely consider being in that kid's life in 2 years, you do not get to be in it on Friday. I got that wrong with Samuel, and it's the thing from that whole stay I'd actually undo. Fourth, before you accept a family invitation, ask a local friend what accepting means. Not her. A friend. Ask a Colombian guy your age what it means when a woman brings you to her mother's house on a Sunday in her neighborhood. He will tell you in 1 sentence and it will save you a month. Fifth, get your Spanish to a real level. Not for charm, not for the Duolingo streak version of it. Because a 40-year-old woman is a complicated person with a complicated life, and if she's operating in your language, she's doing all the translation work, and you are receiving a simplified version of her. Every nuance you'd need to actually understand what's happening, the hedge in a sentence, the joke that's not a joke, the thing her sister said at lunch, lives in the parts you're missing. 2 of the 3 situations I described in this video went sideways in the gap between what was said and what I understood. Sixth, watch time, not words. In a city where people are warm to everyone, warmth tells you nothing. What tells you something is what she does with hours she doesn't have. A woman working 6 days a week, who rearranges a Thursday for you, has told you more than any conversation will. And finally, the honest part. The kind of man who does well here is a man who is genuinely open to the possibility of staying, not planning on it, open to it. If you know, with certainty, that you are leaving and nothing is going to change that, then this specific pool is not for you, and the mature move is to not enter it. That's not a moral judgment, it's a compatibility issue. Go be honest somewhere else in the market. There are plenty of people in that city looking for exactly what you're offering, and they're adults, and that's fine. The mismatch isn't between you and them. The mismatch is between a man who wants a low-stakes experience and a woman for whom low-stakes experiences stopped being available around age 32. So here's where I've landed. The title of this video says, "Don't date older single women in Medellín." And if you came here for a list of reasons those women are dangerous, I've wasted half an hour of your time, and I'm okay with that. They're not dangerous. They are, in my direct experience, the most competent, most direct, least manipulative people I met in that entire city. They asked me clear questions. They gave me clear answers. Not one of them ever played a game with me. The warning is this. In the US, you've had access to a whole tier of romantic life that carries almost no weight. The situationship, the thing that fizzles, the 6 weeks that dissolve without a mark on anybody. You've come to assume that tier exists everywhere. In Laureles, in Belém, in Envigado, with a woman who's 38 and running a household on willpower, that tier does not exist. Every option on the menu is load-bearing. So when you walk in with American dating habits, the softness about intentions, the generosity without clarity, the exit you're quietly holding in your back pocket, you're not going to get hurt. She is, and her kid might, and you'll get on a plane. That's the actual risk, and it's the one nobody makes videos about, because it doesn't flatter anybody. You want to date grown women in Medellín? Great. It's the best version of that city. Just understand you have to show up as a grown man, with a real timeline and a real policy and a real willingness to be told no. And the price of admission is that you don't get to be careless anymore. That's not a warning about them. That's a warning about the version of you that boards the plane. If you got something from this, hit subscribe. I'm in a different city every few months, and the next few cover what a realistic monthly budget actually looks like once you stop pretending, and what I learned the hard way about apartment leases down here. See you on the road.